Good morning. Since this is BIF's 10th anniversary, and Saul, thank you for having me here, and Governor Weber, it's always great to see you. We start with a gift. So for those of you who want to accept the gift, get out your smartphone. And when I was here at BIF last, one of the things I realized is so much of us want to share our ideas with our teams back home. And so we furiously write and we keep track. If you log on to that URL, http://SYPBIF, you'll be able to follow along, share your thoughts. If at any point during this presentation you're agreeing with what I'm saying, we have a little button here which is a yes button. And when you tap it, you'll get more information that helps you pursue some of those thoughts. If, in contrast, I'm up here and you hear me and you say, huh? What is this guy talking about? We have a button for that too, conveniently called huh? And then in the middle, if you want to share with your teams back home or share it to your community, we have a tweet button. Okay. So let me start. When will your moment happen? Because it happens to all of us. What is your moment going to be like? My moment goes something like this. My husband Todd and our two kids, Miles and Coco, and I moved to New York just in time for the bitter winter in New York. Having spent my whole life in California, New York was a very rude awakening. And so we had this terrible, terrible winter, and all four of us decided we need a little bit of respite for this. And so let's go to somewhere really sunny, and let's do something fun and something joyous. And so we went to this great sunny vacation. And then my moment happened, and it goes something like this. My phone rings, and it's my mom. And she says, Keith, it's about your dad. He's gotten very, very sick, and we've had to put him in the ICU, and the doctors are saying that he's not going to make it. And if you want to say goodbye, I need you to get on a plane. So I did what you would all do in that moment, which is I gathered my family and we headed to the airport and we boarded that plane. And for the 7 hours across the country, I wondered what was going to meet me on the other end. And I walked into my dad's hospital room. And this is your story and it's my story. And you sit there and he had deteriorated and they had put him on life support. And so he was there with the help of breathing by this machine, and I sat by his side. And when you're in that moment, of course, it's agonizing and sad, and even though we all know it's coming and we all know we're going to have that moment, when it actually happens, it's so much more vivid and so much more painful than you ever imagined it would be. In my particular case, my dad has been my hero. In his very early 30s, he was on the team, the Apollo team, that put a man on the moon. He, as he would describe it, played a modest role, which is to design the console, the interface that the astronauts use, the instrumentation by which they guided the capsule. And so as I sat there and saw him breathing not on his own, but by machine, I replayed his whole life in my head. Now, almost all of us think that putting a man on the moon is basically a scientific endeavor. It's an engineering endeavor. It's an endeavor of what is known. But what my dad taught me growing up was that it was this huge act of creativity. That in fact, they didn't know how it was going to happen. Even when all engineered, they didn't really even know it was going to work. And so the gift I wanted to bring you today was some of the lessons that my dad taught me and my practice has taught me over the past 25 years. And for us collectively to talk about what it means to live a creative life? It turns out, I think, that if you're lucky, and my dad was, and I think in a small way I am, but I think almost everyone in this room, whether it's for a gigantic moonshot, or because you want to do something in your city, or you want to fix your estate, or you want to make your company a little bit more innovative, or you care about your school board, or just want to create a more decent world for your kids, we are all tapped on the shoulder with a calling. We're put here for a reason. And I think one of the things my dad taught me is you have to listen for that calling. You have to be open for that calling. You have to be willing to nurture it. So how do we do that? We do that by first thinking about this place, this time, you. Think about it. There are 100 billion galaxies in our known universe. And there's something like 300 billion stars in our galaxy. There's our sun, the star at the center. Of the planets we have, there's planet Earth. On this planet Earth, there's 7.125 billion people. It took 180 million spermatozoa to reach the perfect egg, and that's you. So the very first lesson, the very first thing we learn in living a creative life is to appreciate the amazing miracle that we're here in the first place. It is the ultimate act of creativity that you're you. And I think living a creative life starts first by reveling in that miracle. We're in fact all born as creative beings. All of you in this room have survived school that tells you you're not, a workplace that takes it out of you. You've overridden the little voices of self-doubt in your head to get here into this room. I'll go back and tell you the rest of the story of Coco and Miles. So before we lived in bitter, cold New York, we lived in sunny California in a little town called Mill Valley. And my kids, as they were growing up, we used to always go on walks in our town. And for any of those of you who are parents or grandparents, you know what that's like. You set out on a walk to get from here to there, and your kids stop in the craziest places. So my kids would always stop at this beautiful redwood tree, and they would just stop and plant and observe. And they watch the shadows cast across it. And they would look at the epic battles of insects in the little cracks and crevices of that tree. And so one of the things that I think we learn to live a creative life is to hold on to that power of observation, to take it all in, to be our kids and looking at that cracks and crevices as the inspirational battles happen. And I'm not just talking about nature, because as adults, you can have that same curiosity about going to a meeting and someone behaves in a totally bizarre way. Have that openness and presence and curiosity to examine it. Your customer or consumer or client has a desire and wish and it just baffles you. Have the curiosity to stop and pause and examine it. Because if we live our lives by being fully awake and fully alive and fully present for these moments, to on our walk of life, stop at that tree, whatever fill in that blank that tree is for you, and we take our time to really see where other people only look. That's the essential ingredient, because we need a ton of ingredients to live a creative life. You store them all up. You put them in that grand repository of your imagination. Why is that so incredibly important? Why do we need all of those ingredients? Because it turns out in life you want to live a creative life, our brains often betray us. Our biases, our pattern matching betray us. And I've found that the only way in our own practice to live a creative life is to go much deeper, which is every time you're presented with a creative opportunity or a creative problem, you have to dig much more deeply about what it is you believe. And you have to challenge that in order to open up new possibility and new creativity. If you believe you're in a slow growth company, you fail to have the creativity to grow it. If you believe that other team doesn't get it, you fail to have the creativity to engage them in a new way. If you believe you have tried every possible solution, you fail to have ingenuity about how to solve something anew. So our practice as creative beings requires that we fundamentally and deeply challenge our beliefs as people. So think about a creative problem you're working on right now. And often challenging this belief requires that we summon the energy to examine every strand that affects us, every bias that we have, and to call it into question. When we do, that's when we're on the gateway of being able to achieve something brilliant. And that's when we can begin what I call a courageous daily practice of creativity. So I'll share some of my creative practices. So I'm a person who constantly photographs. So everywhere I go, I'm going to take a picture of Joy over here. Hi, Joy. How are you? Nice. I constantly take mind maps instead of notes so that I can compare ideas. I'm almost always up early in the morning because I need the quietude of life to create. I'm constantly the person who is asking a question that's the obvious one in the meeting. These are all parts of my daily practice of creativity. And my point in sharing my practice is not that you should copy my practice, although some of those things might work for you. It's that you actively develop a daily practice. What are the things that help you be present for the moment to do that seeing, not just looking? What is that moment that you create all those ingredients and you curate them in this moment? So think about your daily practice. If you were to describe it to the person next to you, what would you say? If you aren't able to find the words yet to describe to the person next to you what your daily practice is, this opportunity at BIF is a great time for us to perfect it. Why do you need a daily practice? You need a daily practice because every single time that is an opportunity for creativity, you need to draw on that practice to overcome some of the fundamentally difficult things about being human. In any given moment where creativity is required, there is this huge tug of war that goes on inside of us. This tug of war between fear on one hand and love on the other. We can choose to step in the direction of fear. So let me pull up this home button here. If I take a step in direction of fear, I reinforce impossibility. If I take another step in front of fear, it leads to detachment. Detachment leads to blame. Blame leads to avoidance. Avoidance leads to belittlement, subtle cynicism, bitterness, the limiting of self, anger, pain. As adults, we're super sophisticated, so some of these come in lesser forms, but when we're in that moment and we choose fear, these are all the behaviors that result. So think back to your own behavior, your own organization. Unintendedly, when you step in this direction, those are the things that happen. When life presents you with this awesome opportunity to innovate, or to be creative. If you choose that path, that's what happens. Simultaneously and differently, you can choose love. And what does that lead to? It leads to possibility and resilience and acceptance and expansion and proactivity and optimism and partnership and self-affection and joy. You have to meet Joy if you haven't met Joy. She's awesome. So in this present moment, in this moment that you're living in now, what brought you into this great arena, you have a choice of how we spend the next 2 days. You have a remarkable choice of what to do. Because if you choose joy, you attract other people who want to be creative. If you choose love, you choose an ability to attract others. And if you bring your full compassion, you meet them where they are. You meet them in the fact that they too are suffering through this thing called life. That's when you can do something really extraordinary. So let me end my speech where I began. So whatever your moment is that reminds you that our time and energy on this planet are super limited. Whatever is that moment you choose to live your life in the fullest creative expression, to listen to that calling and that whisper. Whenever it is that you actually accept that this is a miracle we're even here, we're all creative beings, and therefore our job is to take advantage of that for the world. To notice every detail, to be fully awake and fully alive, to be willing to challenge our beliefs so deeply that we permit ourselves to think in new ways, to practice it daily, to choose love, to come with compassion. I wanted to tell you that my dad survived that incident. He's at home, he's breathing on his own. We have more time to celebrate his great creativity. And it reminds me of a game we all used to play. You were there, I was there. We would pick an amazing garden wall, and we would get on top, and we would pretend we were on the top of the world, and both sides of that wall were this deep abyss, and we couldn't fall off, and you would run ahead of me, and I would chase you, and we would run out of the joy of it, and then one of us would chicken out, and we'd jump off, and we'd laugh, and we'd giggle. It turns out that when we're adults, the cliffs are real, the wall is higher. We have to convince each other not to look down, but just to look ahead and keep running and running, because that's the joy of it, that's the amazement of it, that's the miracle of it, and it's exactly why we come to BIF, to share our stories, to cheer each other on, to run the wall like it matters, because it absolutely does. So let's have 2 amazing days, and let's run the wall. Thank you.